All right, good morning, everyone. So good morning from our end here in the US. And to give some really brief introductions, I'm Nicole Cacal. I'm the CEO of Forbes Ignite. For those who need a little bit of a refresher, we are the custom solutions practice for Forbes Media, and we are also the Expert Knowledge Network. And who also, all of our participants here on our live stream today are all partners within the Forbes Ignite Expert Knowledge Network. And so to give some really brief introductions, we have Abhinav Singhal, who is joining us here from Singapore, who is the Chief Strategy Officer at ThyssenKrupp. We also have joining us from the UAE in Dubai is Carrgard, who is the Senior Vice President of Business Performance for Rooijen Mobile in the Middle East and Africa. Also joining from Dubai is Rooijen, who is the head of data analytics at the Chalhoub Group, which is one of the largest luxury groups in the entire Middle East. And so I would love to toss this over to our lovely Amanda Ebokosia, who is also a partner in the Forbes Ignite Knowledge Network, who can discuss our partner initiatives and also what's going on in the community.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I'm really excited today because all of our partners today are working on some amazing initiatives through a design thinking process that unites diverse stakeholders from all around the world to really discuss tangible solutions to world's biggest challenges. Our partners are working on so many different initiatives, ranging from future of learning, reimagining the restaurant industry, and the future of mentorship, and so much more. So one initiative we want to involve the audience in is this initiative around spurring cognitive diversity, and if they'd like to help prototype and test some of the solutions we came up with in the last virtual session, they should apply and join an affinity group that will work together to make these ideas real and also to offer some real tangible solutions that we're working across. So without further ado, I would like to hand it over to our wonderful moderator today, Abhi.
Thanks, Amanda and Nicole, for the brief introduction. So let's deep dive into our discussion today on future of work. Maybe a quick remark from my side, or what do we mean by future of work? Because it means a lot to different people. If you think about it, there are three aspects of future of work. There is an aspect of work, which is how do jobs get affected by technology and automation, and mostly you talk about job losses and tasks getting automated. I think the second aspect is around the workplace, which is even exaggerated, I would say, in the current crisis. How do you work and collaborate in a remote virtual setup and still be efficient? And the last aspect is around the concept of reskilling and learning. So how do you work with a workforce, which is possibly not really fit in terms of education for future digital skills, and how do you reskill and retrain them? So for the purpose of our discussion today, we will focus on digital skills and future ready skills because we feel this is really the core of the problem. And I would like to start with maybe asking Mats, one of our panelists, how would you rate Mats, our current education system, in terms of our readiness to tackle the future skills?
Thanks, Abhi. We've had quite a few discussions about this in the past calls and workshops. And one of the things or themes that we have identified is that there is a disconnect between the educational systems and the skills that students get out of the traditional educations that are still the vast majority of students go through, and the skills and that are requested or required in the environment, not just professionally, but overall in the world today, with new concepts like anything artificial intelligence, blockchain, overall digital cloud, all these IoT, drones, anything like this. So the discussions that we've had mostly recently has been about how to bridge that gap, how to potentially change some of the interaction between, I'm here as a partner and as part of the business community. We've been discussing in terms of how to connect between the business community and the educational system through various things like mentorship, education, input into educational curricula, etc. And the last discussion, which was quite interesting, was that we drew the analogy between education as a 18-year-old 18-year-long waterfall structure where the inputs and the process, as well as the final result, is to some extent defined up front through the curriculum, and has been, it's of course evolving, but it's not evolving nearly as quickly as the environment and technology, digitalization, other aspects of our society. So the last discussion, and this was quite an interesting one, we drew the analogy between what companies go through when it comes to IT, technology, and software development in establishing an agile environment as opposed to the traditional waterfall methodology of software development, where we work in shorter cycles. We take the learnings and the inputs of the previous cycle in order to define what comes next. And instead of having a predefined recipe for where we're going to end up and how we're going to do things, more work in a more flexible way, and can therefore respond quicker. So questions that we asked as part of that in terms of what does agile mean in the context of education? How can we get more of that flexibility into the educational programs?
Thanks, Mats. I think that's a very interesting point, right? We all have gone through that experience of spending the first 20, 25 years on education, and then we feel it's done for life. But in the current pace of change, that's hardly true. Brian, let me ask you this question now at this point. So we have talked about a couple of ideas, right? How do we go from a waterfall to an agile model of skill building in students? And how do we create a platform which better suits the skill sets which companies need versus what's available out there? Now, representing a corporate, how much of this you think is in your control, and how much can companies contribute to this initiative, really speaking?
So I think corporations have an incredibly important role to play because at the end of the day, you know, this really is about fostering an ecosystem. And, you know, if we were to, for example, say this is simply down to, you know, governments, you know, incentivizing and establishing certain training programs and whatnot, without, of course, demand from corporates or other types of organizations for those skills, I think very quickly you'd see kind of a loss of momentum. And what is kind of like interesting is that you know, over the past couple of years, we've simultaneously seen a huge rise in need for particular digital skills. I mean, Mats gave us a fantastic list a moment ago, and at the same time, we've seen a huge amount of kind of like interest in you know, students and graduates in these areas as well. So you'd think that automatically you know, there would be this great alignment in supply and demand. While what we know is that that hasn't exactly happened, right? Despite many programs at universities and colleges trying to train these kind of like new digital skills, they often don't seem to have perfect market fit, right? And so I think there are various reasons for this. I mean, one very obvious one that's been mentioned by my fellow panelists, obviously, is just the rate of change that all this is evolving, right? If you start to learn a particular technology in your first year of university, if you graduate 3-4 years later, there's a very good chance that it's already been superseded by one or two further ones. I think, you know, because of this, it's incredibly important that there's a much more dynamic feedback loop, which both means that companies need to be proactive in providing input on the exact type of kind of like skills that they're looking for, the types of hiring, and being transparent in terms of the hiring criteria that they're using, but at the same time, then being open for feedback, etc., when it comes to evolving the processes that they use to hire. Because in many cases, for example, you see that when it comes to AI-related roles, one of the fundamental requirements for the job is that the person must have a degree in computer science. Now, in many states and countries, that effectively says that you need to be male, right? Because 90 to 95% of computer science graduates in many areas are men. That's something that as a hiring manager, I guess, is often not the intention, and yet that is the result. And so being able to have a kind of discussion about, well, what do we need to do as organizations to provide that effective kind of interplay is incredibly important, and to facilitate that matchmaking.
Yeah, yeah. So thanks, Ryan. And I know we also spoke in the last few sessions around the role corporates can play, as you also mentioned, around doing more proactive mentorship and internships with students. We toyed with the idea of, can we have internship in lieu of taxes for companies to be a much, let's say, stronger corporate citizen in the region. But if I ask both of you again, from a corporate perspective, what is stopping companies today to play a more proactive role? What is stopping you and Mats today to go out, reach out to universities, give your inputs on what you need in terms of skills, or to work with the government on some of these initiatives around reskilling, or mentor 5 students each? What would you need to make that happen?
Yeah, well, from my side, I think that the main limiting factor is simply time and focus. So if there was an easier way to I wouldn't say incentivize, but to facilitate that access. So if someone came to me from one of the universities, for example, I don't even know, to be honest, which is quite embarrassing, but what are the most foremost universities for AI or digital transformation in the UAE? So I'm a bit out of touch, partially because I don't have a child who goes to university here. I don't hire fresh graduates typically. We usually hire people who have at least a couple of years experience. So in all honesty, I'm not really looking in that. But if I were to be in a room with students, I'm sure we would have immediately a very interesting conversation. So I don't think it would take much, because I would like to contribute, provided that it fits within it's not a massive time commitment that would prevent me from doing my job. So if it means spending every month or two a few hours with one of the schools in order to engage with the students and give them our perspective, as long as that is facilitated somehow, I would be very open to doing that. And I'm sure that that investment in time and the understanding I would get of what's going on would pay itself back quite quickly, either in terms of getting contacts or changing the way that we recruit by knowing and getting access to a pool of keen young talent, but also in terms of being able to influence to some extent. I mean, this wouldn't be a short-term thing, because changing a curriculum is a multi-year kind of project, right? So even if we would say that we would need skills of this type or that type, it would take quite a long time. But I think over time, the investment would definitely be worth it.
Yeah, no, I completely resonate. I think have the same experience myself, that we would love to contribute, but you need also some formal incentives to do it at scale. And to do it in a more disciplined manner. And that's where, coming back to the initial discussion we had around the platform, I think makes a lot of sense that in an ideal world, if you can have a platform where companies who are subject matter experts can offer the relevant courses and do the right skill categorization on what capabilities the corporate world needs, and we can match it with the talent pool available and use the power of AI to also create the curriculum and shape the curriculum to match that skill gap, and get some pulses around mentorship and practical training, then you have the whole ecosystem flowing in, where the right talent is getting groomed and matched to the skill set which is required, and you have a very healthy ecosystem of digital skills being built over time. But as nice as it sounds, my challenge to the panel would be, including me for that matter, what can we influence in the near term, right? To go onto this path of creating this ecosystem and having all these parts of the puzzles together, what can we do in the next 6 to 12 months to start this change?
So I'd say the first step in the process is probably aligning and getting our definitions straight, right? I remember one of the earliest discussions, we had of each other was just a breadth of meaning that's encompassed when people talk about data analytics and AI. Right, and I think at the best of times, there's a fair bit of confusion inside organizations, and I can only imagine what confusion it causes, for a student, looking to understand what skills they need to learn. right? I think, you know, particularly when you're talking, you know, about you know, sometimes the cutting edge work, you know, on you know, the deep learning, particularly things like deep reinforcement learning, etc. I mean, the success stories, of course, like AlphaZero, are fantastically interesting. But to pretend that you know, most organizations have any kind of reinforcement learning or even deep learning deployed at this stage is a fantasy, right?
Yeah.
And quite often in interviews as well, I'll just ask people like, hey, like, you know, tell me how regression works, right? Tell me about some GLMs, right? And if we do talk about machine learning, like, tell me about random forest, right? Tell me about support vector machines. I mean, stuff that was in textbooks in the 80s, right? Because obviously it's great to find someone who has you know, a lot of these kind of cutting edge skills, and who has a deep interest in, let's say, these theoretical frontiers of computer science. I think what companies need most of all is somebody who can hit the ground running and deliver practical value. And I think sometimes from the outside looking in, it's easy to get the impression that organizations are these incredibly sophisticated, advanced, gleaming, well-oiled machines. But as I'm sure all of us would admit, quite often, you know, when you actually pop the hood, you know, the truth is a little less glamorous, which I guess is also good, because it means that people like ourselves have jobs in transforming these organizations. So a little bit of honesty, and I think, you know, some clarity on definitions, I think is an important first step.
Makes sense, Ryan. Matt, you would like to add anything on that?
Yeah, I think in terms of, if you look at it on a shorter term, like 6 to 12 months, and the objective is to have better alignment with the people, the students who graduate in 6 or 12 months, and what they're going into, and into the workforce, and or into the whatever environment that they're going to start working in. Then on a curriculum level, it's quite late to do something. So there you can, I guess, look at their final year, and then look at the kind of projects and the kind of courses that they do. Typically in most educations, at least, I mean, it's been a long time since I went through school, but the last year would often be more applied, where the first few years at university are more theoretical. You lay the foundation, you do foundational courses. I went to engineering school, so that meant a lot of math, mechanics, this kind of things. Whereas in the last year, it was more guided by projects, where partly those projects were in collaboration with the companies, in order to have real projects that were connected to something that the companies were actually doing them. So I think that's where I would start, by looking at some of those and making sure, or increasing the amount of cooperation between the corporate world and companies, and could be government, or could be anywhere where the students would end up, and that final year. But then if you start going at it on a more medium term point of view, as Ryan mentioned, it's very hard to know from a specific technology point of view what will be relevant in 3 or 4 years, because things move very quickly. So there, it's more to make sure that the foundational skills, and if you look at machine learning, it's applied mathematics, right? Statistics, mathematics, together with computer software, and the coding, and the DevOps and deployment and management of those things. So most likely mathematics, statistics, software engineering, and DevOps and infrastructure would also be components of whatever is around 3 or 4 years from now, but the specifics of how they're put together will be different. So to make sure that the foundation is solid, which I'm sure most universities are going with. And also what I would like to add, because this is what we see with many of the younger, fresh graduates, people who've only worked for a year or two, that the soft skills and the way that they apply their knowledge often needs a lot of coaching and development before they can start to really feel that they're contributing parts to the environment. So this includes stuff like communication skills. How do you analyze a problem? How do you document and carry yourself forward? And this is where, in many ways, when we recruit, it's relatively easy to find people who have the hardcore technology skills, whether that is knowing a certain software system or having worked on a certain coding language. It's much harder to find well-rounded individuals who have the technical knowledge, but who can also come into an often, complex corporate environment with politics, with shifting demands and all that kind of thing. So what I find is that the coaching of the more junior resources often go more into the soft skill side than it does in the hardcore technology side. I think the coronavirus situation has been one of the biggest accelerators of digital transformation worldwide in many ways, because many, both institutions, companies, and even families on the individual level, we've forced to change many things about how we go about our lives as part of this. And work from home and remote working, remote education is a massive challenge, and that has shown many of the difficulties for the educational establishments and schools to rapidly adapt and change. But I think that the changes that have been forced as a result of the epidemic are long-lasting in some ways. I'm not saying schools will go remote and go online and be fully digital forever, but elements of what has been made a necessity in the last few weeks, I believe will come and become permanent fixtures. And it's also shown, and I can say that for our family, it's shown that some of the things that we thought were difficult are actually not so difficult. And it's made us think, in our case, we have a 12-year-old son, about education in a different way and about the future of education in a different way. So it's hard to tell exactly what the changes would be, but I definitely think for sure there are some negative, hopefully mainly short-term impacts of the epidemic. But I can definitely see longer-term opportunities that have been revealed because of the necessities of the epidemic. And I really hope that educational systems, companies, institutions, governments will capitalize on that in terms of taking the learnings and seeing, okay, we didn't think that this was possible, but now we saw that it was possible because we had to do it. And therefore, we will make that a more permanent element. And if you turn it into skills sharing, that all of a sudden means that if you don't need to go to a physical school in order to have a lesson, you can have a lesson with anybody, right? And you can have scale education in a completely different way. So if it's about connecting people and connecting anything from teachers to subject matter experts with students, putting different students together globally and locally in different ways with different ways of interacting. I don't think that it's a replacement of face-to-face interaction, but it showed that it's possible to do a lot more than was previously done.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Couldn't agree more. Ryan, anything you would like to add based on your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, this additional pressure, right, has caused a bit of a bifurcation when it comes to analytics and AI investments, right? I think anything that was seen as speculative or you know, purely innovation focused, I think will probably be depressed for the next 6 to 12 months. As companies seem to seek to strengthen their cash position and quite frankly, you know, and ensure that their basics are in order. I think any analytics initiatives that are aimed at strengthening those foundations, I think will soar, right? And I think you see this a lot in companies who all of a sudden are investing in their digital presence, right? Because if everybody's at home, you know, ensuring that your website works on mobile suddenly isn't a luxury anymore. It's fundamental. You know, similarly, you know, I think analytics teams who are focused on driving operational excellence, you know, and squeezing those extra you know, dollars out of the supply chain and broader value chain, I think will do very well. But any teams that have always dismissed the, oh, well, you know, why would I need to put a $sign on my use case? You know, everybody knows AI is important. I think those people are in for a rough ride.
Yeah. No, makes sense. So I'm just mindful we have a few minutes left. I think we've had some great ideas brainstormed in this session and concrete takeaways to work with. Maybe let me end this with one practical advice we can share to whoever who is listening on this topic. What would you advise regarding future of work on how can we better prepare ourselves? And let me start first. For example, in the last couple of months of lockdown, I personally felt that there is a lot of opportunities for us to learn and relearn and do courses ourselves and invest in learning ourselves, find a buddy for reverse mentoring and pick up a new topic or skill which we can learn and change personally. So I would just want to hear one practical advice you would share with whoever is on the call today on what we can do about future of work personally.
Yeah, so let me start. I've done the same thing as you do, and as part of looking at education from a digital point of view, it's nothing new. It's something we've been looking at a lot, but there is a massive amount of almost free. Many of them are free, but free or very, very cheap online courses about absolutely everything. So personally, those go in areas of cloud, in analytics, and going on sites like Udemy, like Udacity, any of those. Often it takes just a few days or weeks of learning a new skill. And I encourage everyone who isn't doing it already to just go on those sites and select something and just go for it and see where it goes. It doesn't mean that you have to finish the courses. I've got a lot of unfinished courses, but it's opened my eyes to a lot of things that we could be doing differently.
Yeah, I love what Matt said there. Last year I spent 9 months, or basically spend my weekend for 9 months doing a machine learning engineering degree on Udacity. And quite frankly, I mean, I used machine learning in my degree, God knows how many years ago. And with all the new toys coming out and frameworks, I wanted to kind of dip my toe in. And before I'd known, I'd spent 9 months completing this, and I was just kind of like blown away by kind of like the quality of the experience. And I think, you know, there's one thing I took away from that. It is that it's really important to have an open mind when it comes to these new modes of learning, and to really also as organizations to engage with this, right? Both engage with it in terms of using them for internal talent development, but also taking it seriously when somebody says, look, I don't have a master's in computer science, but I've done these, 3 online degrees, for example, and really recognizing that it's very much possible to develop skills just due to the high quality of the experience, and knowing what's kind of coming in the next couple of years with proper virtual reality. I mean, I'm incredibly bullish on how this is going to develop, and particularly in terms of broader kind of like fairness, how this will democratize access to high quality education. I mean, back to my kind of first point, I just think that as organizations, and corporations, we need to be making sure to evolve as well, because if we democratize education, but we still ignore candidates who didn't go to Ivy League universities, of course nobody's going to be served by that kind of legacy attitude either.
Thank you, folks. It was an amazing discussion. I think a lot of ideas to take forward. That's all from our panel. Nicole, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all so much for joining and for speaking to our group. And thank you again for carving time out of your day. And you've given us a lot to chew on. And there's been a lot of great, incredible insights that obviously will continue to live on beyond this conversation. And so if you have any lingering questions, lingering comments, even after we end this live stream, feel free to drop it in the comments. And we plan on having these live streams every Friday. And so we'll have continue on discussions and so on and so forth. So thank you, everybody. And please feel free to reach out. So tune in next time, and thank you all for joining.